In a small, quiet village in Nigeria, there lived a woman named Sarah. She was a kind-hearted woman loved by everyone who knew her. Sarah had a deep love for her husband, Daniel, and when they married, they dreamed of building a family filled with love and joy. Little did Sarah know that this dream would soon be shattered. Sarah gave birth to 6 beautiful girls, one after another. Each child was a blessing, full of life, laughter, and potential. But as each girl was born, Daniel's smile slowly faded. He wanted a son. He wanted a child who could carry on his name, someone to inherit his wealth, his family's legacy. But despite all his prayers and hopes, all he got were daughters. The pressure from his family began to mount. His brothers and relatives started whispering in his ears. "What's the use of having so many daughters?" they would say. "The girl will grow up and leave you to marry another man. She will never carry on your name. Why waste time training them?" At first, Daniel tried to ignore the whispers. But as time went on, the pressure became too much. He began to believe that his daughters were a curse, a waste of time. Sarah, who had poured all her love into each of her daughters, was devastated when Daniel came to her one fateful evening. "Sarah," Daniel said coldly, his voice hard, "I can no longer stay with you. I need a son, someone to carry my name. You have failed me. I cannot raise girls, so I'm sending you and our daughters away." Sarah stood frozen, her heart shattered. "But Daniel, I've given you all my love. I've given you 6 beautiful children. What is it that I haven't done? Why am I being punished for this?" But Daniel's mind was made up. He turned his back on Sarah, the woman he had once promised to love and cherish, and forced her and her 6 daughters to leave the home that they had shared for years. They had no choice but to go to Sarah's maternal home, where she sought refuge with her family. Meanwhile, Daniel moved on quickly. He brought another woman into his house, and within a short time, she bore him 3 sons. Daniel, filled with pride and joy, finally believed that his life had meaning again. He could now show off his sons, and his family name would continue. As the years passed, Sarah struggled. She worked tirelessly to raise her daughters in a small house, doing everything she could to ensure they had everything they needed. It wasn't easy. She went through unimaginable hardships, but she never once regretted her decision to keep her daughters and raise them in love. She watched as each of her girls grew into remarkable young women. One became a doctor, another a lawyer, another an accountant, and others followed their dreams, carving out successful careers for themselves. Sarah's daughters never gave up on their mother. They studied hard, worked hard, and, through their success, brought her joy. They promised to repay her for all her sacrifices, and they did. But one thing remained in Sarah's heart: she never stopped loving Daniel, even after everything he had done to her. She held on to the hope that one day, her daughters would show him what love truly meant. Years went by, and Sarah's daughters became well-known figures in their fields. They were respected, admired, and successful. But their father, Daniel, and his 3 sons were a distant memory. His family had never come to visit or show any interest in them, not even when they achieved great things. Sarah's daughters had grown into strong women, but a small part of each of them still carried the pain of their father's rejection. One day, a man was rushed into the hospital. He needed emergency surgery, but the hospital staff demanded a deposit of 1 million naira before they could proceed. The situation was chaotic. Family members and friends of the man were crying, begging, and pleading with the nurses. No one had the money to pay for the surgery, and the man's life was hanging in the balance. From the back office, Sarah's daughter, Dr. Emily, a renowned surgeon, heard the commotion. She stepped out of her office, curious about the situation. When she saw the man being rushed in, her heart nearly stopped. It was her father, Daniel, the same man who had rejected her and her mother so many years ago. Daniel's brothers, who had once sided with Daniel, stood by, desperately begging for help. They didn't even recognize their niece, Dr. Emily, as she stepped forward. "Doctor, please," they cried, "please help our brother. He's dying. We don't have the money, but he's the only one we have." Dr. Emily's eyes went wide with shock. She couldn't believe her ears. She had grown up hearing how her father had rejected her and her siblings. She had spent years wondering how he could abandon them so easily. Yet here he was, now in need of help. But the people around him didn't even recognize her. "Do you not recognize me?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Her uncles stared at her in confusion, their eyes filled with desperation. "No, we don't," one of them said. "Please, doctor, save him." Dr. Emily's heart was heavy with emotion. She took a deep breath and spoke again, this time with authority. I am Emily, your niece. This is my father lying here, and I am the one who can save his life. Get out of the way." Her uncles froze, their faces filled with shock. They dropped to their knees, realizing who they were speaking to. They had spent years rejecting this family, and now they were begging for their help. They didn't know how to react. In that moment, Dr. Emily called for immediate surgery to save her father's life. The tension in the air was palpable. As the surgery proceeded, the minutes felt like hours, but eventually, the doctor came out with good news. Daniel had survived, he was alive. After the surgery, Daniel woke up, and for the first time in many years, he asked to see his daughters and his ex-wife, Sarah. He knew he had wronged them, but he didn't know how to make it right. When they all stood in front of him, Daniel began to speak. "I've made so many mistakes," he said, his voice trembling. "I sent you away, Sarah. I rejected my own flesh and blood. I believed I needed sons to be complete, but in the end, it was you and your daughters who made me realize the truth." He turned to his daughters. "I watched as you all grew into successful, amazing women, while my sons have turned out to be, well, I haven't seen them in years. They don't even care if I'm alive or dead. But you, my daughters, have shown me what love truly is." As tears filled Daniel's eyes, he turned to Sarah, his voice shaking. "Please, forgive me. I've learned the hard way that it's not about having sons. It's about having love, family, and respect. You gave me everything, and I treated you like you were nothing. Please forgive me." Sarah, standing beside her daughters, looked at the man she had once loved. She had suffered for so long, but she knew that forgiveness was the key to healing. She turned to him and said softly, "I've carried this pain for many years, but I forgive you. It's not just about me. It's about my daughters and the lives they've built for themselves. You see, it's not about the number of sons or daughters you have. It's about how you love, how you raise them, and how you treat them." As Sarah spoke those words, the tension in the room began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace and healing. Daniel had learned a valuable lesson, that the love and strength of a mother and her daughters could surpass anything else in the world. Her daughters stood tall behind her, each of them processing what Daniel had just confessed in their own way. Dr. Emily, the eldest, still looked at her father with a mix of disbelief and resentment, the memories of his abandonment fresh in her mind. But she also recognized the pain in his eyes, the guilt that had consumed him for years. Joy, the second eldest, held her mother's hand tightly, her eyes betraying the vulnerability she tried to hide. All of them had been raised by Sarah with no father in sight. But now, this man was back, and the question on everyone's mind was, could they forgive him? As the room fell silent, Daniel, sensing the weight of the moment, spoke again, his voice filled with regret. "I've lived for years in isolation, and my sons have become lost. They don't care about me or about anything anymore. I've failed them just as much as I failed you." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, Daniel? You always thought sons would save you, but now you're telling me they've turned their backs on you." Daniel's face dropped and he nodded. "Yes, Sarah, the sons I thought would carry on my legacy are lost. I haven't seen or heard from them in years. They were spoiled, given everything they wanted, and instead of being the men I hoped for, they turned into irresponsible, reckless young men. They abandoned their studies, left their homes, and wandered off in search of something they couldn't even define." Emily, who had always been the most compassionate of the 6 sisters, felt a pang of sorrow for the men Daniel had once hoped would carry his name. She could hear the pain in his voice. But there was something more at stake here. This wasn't just about Daniel's mistakes. It was about understanding why his sons had gone astray, and how the choices he had made had affected them as much as they had affected Sarah and her daughters. "I don't understand, Father," Emily said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You wanted sons to carry on your legacy, but what you failed to realize is that it's not about a name, it's about love, discipline, and guidance. You gave them none of that. You let them grow up believing they were entitled to everything without earning it." Daniel lowered his head, feeling the weight of his daughter's words. "I was blinded by my own pride. I wanted them to be the men I never had the chance to be, but I failed to see that I was neglecting them. They never learned what it meant to work hard, to appreciate the value of family. And now they are lost. A heavy silence fell over the room. Sarah turned to her daughters. We've built lives for ourselves, and I don't regret a single thing. But Daniel is right about one thing. Our daughters, you, all of you, have proven that it's not about gender. It's about what you give to the world, what you do with your life. You've made me proud beyond words. But his sons, his pride, have become lost in a way that none of us could have ever imagined. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Startled, Sarah turned to see her sister, Grace, standing at the entrance. Her face was pale and her eyes were wide with urgency. Sarah, you need to hear this, she said, her voice shaking. It's about Daniel's sons. Daniel's face went pale as Grace stepped into the room, looking over at him with an expression that said it all. There was more to the story than he had let on. What's happened? He asked, his voice filled with anxiety. Grace swallowed hard. I've been keeping track of the boys over the years, through mutual connections, and recently, I've heard some disturbing things about them. It's worse than we thought. Sarah stepped forward, her brow furrowed. What do you mean? Grace hesitated but then spoke, her words coming out slowly. One of them is in prison for assault, another has been caught in a massive drug scandal, and the third, well, he's living on the streets, addicted to alcohol and gambling. He's been in and out of rehab facilities but refuses to get help. The room fell into a stunned silence. Daniel's face turned ashen as the truth sank in. His sons, the ones he had held onto so dearly, had gone completely astray. I was so focused on having sons that I ignored everything else, Daniel whispered, his voice cracking with the weight of the revelation. I wanted a legacy, but I never thought about how to guide them. I thought they'd automatically become what I wanted, but now look at them. They're broken. Emily stepped forward, her heart heavy for her father, but also for the three men whose lives had spiraled out of control. This is the consequence of neglect, Father. The choices you made affected them just as much as they did us. They needed love, attention, and guidance, not just to be handed everything they wanted. Sarah placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, her face filled with compassion. It's never too late to change, Daniel. You can't undo the past, but you can try to make things right. These boys may have lost their way, but they still need someone to show them the way back. The room was heavy with emotion. It was clear that Daniel had learned the most painful lesson of all, that love and family were far more valuable than any wealth or legacy. He had spent years chasing the wrong things, neglecting the ones who had always been there for him. I'll try, Daniel said quietly. I'll do whatever it takes to find them and help them. I may have failed as a father, but I won't let them continue down this path. As he spoke those words, a knock came at the door again. This time, it was one of Daniel's former business partners, a man who had always been close to the family. He stepped into the room, his face grim. There's more, he said, his voice heavy. I've just received a message. Your sons have come together. They're in the city, and they're asking for you. Daniel's eyes widened. For years, his sons had been unreachable, but now they were reaching out. Could this be the opportunity he had been waiting for to make things right? Without a second thought, Daniel stood up, his determination clear. Let's go find them, he said, his voice strong. I'll do whatever it takes to repair the damage I've caused. As the family stood together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, a sense of unity filled the room. Daniel knew that the road to redemption would not be easy, but for the first time in his life, he was ready to take responsibility for his actions. And so, the story of Daniel's redemption began, one that would test the strength of family, love, and forgiveness. But as they prepared to leave, Daniel stopped and turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with regret. Sarah, he said, his voice soft, thank you. You've taught me more than I could have ever learned on my own. You gave me everything and I failed you. Sarah smiled gently. It's never too late, Daniel, we can all change. But we need to face our mistakes before we can truly heal. With that, they walked out of the room, ready to confront the past and heal the broken bonds. But as they stepped outside, the sky darkened and a storm began to brew. Would Daniel be able to find his sons before it was too late? Would the past's mistakes haunt them forever, or would they find a way to rebuild their broken family? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling tales. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, we love hearing from you. And stay tuned for the next chapter of our incredible story.